screaming and beating your chest and dancing around and crying and all these things, which is great and amazing and necessary. But it's all just feminine practice. Like, there needs to be this widening, this awareness of the awareness. You know, I'm in this moment, I'm having this experience. Rather than identifying with that experience, actually sitting back, becoming aware of all of it, and then witnessing yourself through that. And then, you know, this is the key piece. And back to the very first question of what is masculinity, it is this key piece of the transmission of consciousness, which you cannot get when you're identified with the screaming or the emotional release or whatever. So there's nothing wrong with, you know, it's fucking necessary to scream, release, absolutely necessary. But if that's all you're doing, you're going to come home to your partner after a weekend of inverted commas men's work, when all you've done is identify with your emotion and with your energy and with your expression. You are no more masculine to her than before you left. You're actually probably more feminine.
Let's start with what masculinity means to you.
Energetic transmission of embodied consciousness. Traits and so many ideas and so many beliefs and ideologies of what a man is and what masculinity is, and a lot of them are great and a lot of them just miss the actual underlying current of it. And if you don't have that grounded, deeply embodied, wide consciousness, then I feel it's kind of missing. It's missing the point. You can have the strength, you can have the leadership, the integrity, these really confidence, all the really beautiful traits. But without that consciousness, I think you're missing.
Yeah. So what does consciousness mean to you then? Because it's a word just like love or spirit.
Mm-hmm.
It can throw people in many different directions of what consciousness actually means. So could we dive into that a little bit more?
For me, it's the space of which within everything else exists. So you have your mind and you have your thoughts and you have the matrix and the awareness of these things, and it's the awareness of the awareness that for me is consciousness. So everything you can hear, you can touch, you can smell, you can see, you can taste, you can think, you can feel, all of this is always changing. And this will never be the same ever at any point. It's constantly in flux. And consciousness is that with which all of these other things exist in. So to have awareness of these things is great, but taking a step back and having awareness of the awareness of these things, that's a whole other thing. And I think that is why it's not the easiest concept to grasp if you've never touched in this kind of stuff before. And I also think that's why society is lacking so much of it, because it is more nuanced than just go to the gym, make a bunch of money, live a life of purpose, be a good man. There's a depth. You have this kind of horizontal plane of those things to be able to provide and protect and lead and be good and be kind and be open-hearted and all these things. But there's this depth that a lot of men miss. And that's the thing that's really, it kind of, it differentiates between men's work and then like real solid, powerful masculinity.
Hmm. And with so much changing so quickly and so much in culture and this time that we live right now, it feels very different from, you know, two generations or even one generation ago. So would you say that this is the thing that's going to allow people to live in more health, alignment, and prosperity overall? Do you think this is the thing to lean into to explore the range of consciousness?
No, I think you need all of it. I spent a lot of time in a meditation school, yoga school, and they were very much about depth. They were very much about, you know, finding this connection to oneness and source and becoming wider than all it is. But at the same time, they were completely avoiding everything on this plane. So there was no shadow work. There was no, oh, that's a pattern from my childhood, which I need to look into. It was just, oh no, let's just meditate over it. And it was very detrimental. And it was just another spiritual bypass. I'm meditating, so I'm great. And it's funny, I've met quite a few dudes who say, oh, no, I meditate, so I don't need this other stuff. So it's very much, you need both. There are patterns from your childhood, intergenerational trauma, all of these things which have been gifted to you. And it may not be your fault, but it's your responsibility to deal with that, to heal that, to stop yourself from passing down those things to your children, to those that look up to you. Like, man, have a 6-week-old son, and I've done pretty substantial amount of work, probably 9 years, I reckon, from, you know, long 6-7 week meditation retreats in silence, to dark rooms, to months in the jungle, to breathwork trainings, to fucking everything I could get my hands on, and healed a lot. Had deep, deep conversations with my father about my upbringing, about our connection, about our relationship. So much healing, so much growth, so much revealing, and just, you know, deep learning about who I am and why I do things the way I do, and been teaching these things for quite a few years now. And then we put a fucking 6-week-old baby at 3 in the morning screaming 120 decibels in your ear on no sleep. It's a reflection. I was not aware. Maybe I was aware. Maybe the extent of it, I wasn't aware.
Tell me everything. I need to
Oh,
know. I don't have kids. Tell me everything. What happens in that space, in that liminal space of, yeah, this being that you're responsible for? What gets reflected?
mm. I've always, I mean, not always. I've often heard of these moments where a parent might shake their child, or throw their child down, or lock their child at home or in a car, and you're just like, fucking wow,
Hmm.
to do that Like I could never imagine. Yeah, I could never imagine how stretched one must have to be to do that to something that you'd quite literally die for. And because I've done all of this work, I'm fucking miles from that point, but I get to this edge of like, oh, imagine never having done any work on yourself.
Mm.
Imagine your nervous system is absolutely fucking taut as a baseline.
Well, that's when you reach for the drugs.
Oh, mate, that is. We live in a generation where we have access to healing 24 hours a day on our phone, on our fucking like corner shop. Like everywhere there's healing, there's access to whatever you want. And we're the first generation where that's really a thing. So you look at our parents, you look at their parents. You know, their parents, fucking the coming out of the Second World War. The entire world is traumatized at that point. There's no therapy, there's no men's work, it's just fucking get on with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this societal push to, well, men need to be softer, more sensitive. But there's no direction, there's no role model of that. There's no like, how do I do what I need to do and be that? How do I hold my family and support and provide and protect and do all of the things that I need to do, carrying all of the burden that I have with no therapy, no men's work, and you want me to be softer and more sensitive? And then they birthed our parents. And typically, because of the way that the men or the fathers were, that's going to really influence whether our fathers were very much the same or very much the opposite, whether it's kind of the dominant shadow or the passive shadow of masculinity. And it's like you put a fucking or multiple screaming children at 3 a.m. on no sleep, where all this dude has is to chin up and get on with it. And no wonder we were a traumatized society. It's a fucking it is a wild ride.
Mm. So in your 9 years, almost a decade of diving inward and seeking understanding and learning a lot, like what's translated into these last 6 weeks? What can you notice? Ah, okay, there's that thing that's helped, and I'm able to pull on that and reach for that tool that I know I have. Like, what do you have those moments of like, wow, if it wasn't for this thing
Yeah,
I
I
know
mean,
about?
yeah,
Mm.
masculine practice for me is the. I mean, first you need to excavate. You need to clear the pipes. You need to really, literally clear out of your system all of the shit, all of the trauma and the pain and the burden and the fucking anger and. But then there is the nervous system capacity, and this is the thing that I've realized. Like I'm pretty. I would say that I'm pretty wide when it comes to that. Like And this is the thing, exactly to your question, this is the thing that stood out the most. It's like, oh fuck, like I can hold a lot. I can hold a lot, but it's that fucking moment where it hits the edge and doesn't stop. And then that's a whole other, it's like, oh, okay, that's where my work is. So masculine practice is basically the art of getting into uh, uncomfortable situations, whether it's ice bath or some kind of kundalini, or getting into really uncomfortable situations, and then just, as we spoke in the beginning, becoming aware of the awareness. Oh, I'm in pain. Oh, this sucks. Oh, ma. But rather than identifying with that, which puts you in, you know, energetically in your feminine, you become wider than all of it. So it's all happening, but you're the container that holds it all. So yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it sucks. Yes, you wish it would end. Yes, yes, yes. And you just say yes to everything. So yeah, it could go for another 4 hours and I'm okay. So this practicing that is the thing that's really, really helped me. And it's, you know, I can sit there with him screaming and I'm just like, I'm smiling at him, just like, whatever you need, man, I'm here. But, you know, there's been a couple of times where I'm like, wow, you're fed, you changed, you're like, there's nothing you need. You're just, other than to just fucking scream. And that shit gets loud. So,
How has it tested your relationship dynamic with your partner? Can we talk about
that's, we're in it at the moment. It's like, there's 30% more to do. You have 30% less time to do it on 30% less sleep.
that?
And it's just, I look back on my life and I'm like, what the fuck was I wasting so much time for? It gets you really dialed in with like, okay, I've got 2 hours now. That's not 2 hours to fuck around and look at Instagram. And it's like, no, I've only got 2 hours rather than 7.
Yeah, that's definitely me. I get that. It's the accountability piece, isn't it? It's like we will fall to below the level in which we are reliant on or needed. And yeah, it's such a big one.
Mm,
But for me, it just translates to like hacking your day to making sure you've got things that you are accountable to.
mm,
Otherwise, yeah, the path of least resistance is the one you're gonna subconsciously move towards. Yeah. Okay. So talk a little bit more about that 30% that you're tuning into and realizing.
I mean, there's the whole, we both work from home, which is amazing. Like, I cannot imagine
Mm,
being a single parent. Um, we both have very basically identical ways of how we want to raise him. Um, so I have no, yeah, there's not going to be childcare or any of these things. Um, you know, maybe once he's 3, there's these Steiner schools that they go play outside in the forest and things like this. But um, we're both very much, we want to be hands on, but then we need to work. And you know, because he's only 6 weeks old, it's very new, and she spends a lot of time with him. But now it's getting to the point where it's like, okay, can I spend more time with him?
mm.
Love to, but I also need to get some work done. And then it's finding this balance of our own time. I mean, time as a couple is
Nothing.
it's it's something that I know exactly how, but it's the bandwidth of, is that the priority
Yeah.
when there are these other things that need to get done? And at some point, it's going to need to be the priority, because if that falls away, then we're fucked. We're in a very good space. We've come a long way as a couple. We haven't been together for that long, but she does what I do except with women. So she's very aware of this work and relationship dynamics, and it makes it very easy, but it's challenging.
Yeah.
It's not like I go off to work from 9 to 5 and she sits at home all day and that's the role. It's like it's a new way of being which we're figuring out.
Yeah, I can imagine there's a lot of awareness. Am I right? Of patterns, of traits, of tendencies, of things showing up, things that you're experiencing and communicating them. And the
There needs to
question,
be more.
okay, great. Yeah, well, my question will be like, is that too much of anything is unhealthy? So too much of, I don't know, like this will be my assumption. Two people, two individuals in these spaces that are, the work is the work. It's diving into all the internal processes. So is there a lot
I,
of that that goes on?
yeah, I can't imagine it any other way. I've had it the other way and I don't want
Yeah, for sure. Same.
it.
Yeah. At least you know where you want to be met, right?
Yeah. And to have someone that is so willing to meet me
Yeah.
and so willing to self-reflect and look at her own shit and come to me with solutions of how she's going to be better.
Mm-hmm.
Like she fucking blows my mind how capable she is.
Mm.
And I've had not that, and no thanks. But it's a common question. It's like, oh, it must get tiring. Just you're always in process. It's like you're not always in process
Yeah.
because once you process, then you figure it out, and then you shift, and then it probably won't happen ever again. Maybe once or twice, but then so it's very common for people to get stuck in a relationship where they're always processing. So, well, if you're always processing, it's probably not a fucking relationship you want to stay in because you're not growing.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
just going around in fucking circles.
Yeah. I always say that the small talk actually drains me because I can feel what's underneath it. And if
Mm,
that's not being spoken or expressed, like
mm,
it's actually really draining. So
mm.
like the big talk, I guess would be the other way. But yeah, it's like it's just bringing this in and nipping it in the bud, before it gets bigger. And I think that's a thing in my previous relationship where we never had that foundation. We built up so many. I'm still kind of processing this stuff. Like we built up so many, I'd say, unhealthy habits or like lack of boundaries, and that just built over time. It became our baseline. I can speak for me. It became my baseline, and then trying to like go back steps was just almost impossible. I just
Mm.
couldn't do it.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. It's difficult once you have those patterns really installed to kind of change it. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's difficult.
do you work with couples?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. We work with couples together as well.
Hmm. Yeah, but that's healing for you guys in that space, right?
It's super nice to. So in the beginning, I'd only work with men, and I'd get all these perspectives from the man. I'm like, hmm, really, really, that's real. And, and I would at the same time, I'd also have women say, "Oh, I've got this issue with my partner. Here it is." And then I'd speak to the guy, and he'd give me a totally different perspective. So to speak to them both as a couple and then individually, it gives you a much greater perspective and understanding of like a more holistic view of what's really happening.
Hmm. What were the patterns that called you into this relationship?
What were the patterns that called me in?
Yeah,
What do you mean?
so in reference to there's always some allurement or some unconscious behavior going on that attracts us to another, something that we didn't get, something that we got too much of, or like were those things rearing their head when you connected?
No, I mean, to be honest, the thing that drew me in was if I was born a girl, my name would have been Sarah Warner, and her name is Sarah Warner.
Yeah.
And we met 13 years ago. We had a picnic in the park randomly. She was friends with my wife at the time. Well, she was working with my wife at the time. So we met 13 years ago, and then 12 years later, I find out there's this woman that does exactly what I do, except with women, and she's got the same name as me. And I was just like, yeah, this is too, there's too much for this not to be a thing. And then yeah, one thing led to the other, and it was just like, yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I do have the perspective that when the attraction and part of the allurement in connection is a reminder of something that played a part in our lives early on. And it doesn't have to be like that, but in most cases I've found it is.
Yeah, I understand your question. For this, it was, there wasn't something specific. I can see that in past relationships, but um, this has been such a pattern interrupt on so many levels, um, because of the work that we've done on ourselves, and because of the work that we do in relationship together. Um, yeah, and it's not perfect. We're both somewhat avoidant, um, which is always fun when the thing doesn't get said and it needs to. And neither of you want to say it.
Mm. Yeah, I found a lot of solace in that space. It feels very comfortable.
Oh, that's great. Let's just not talk about it at all. Yeah, not gonna work. Uh,
Yeah, fascinating. I would love to learn a bit more about your story. I know you're an architect for some time, but I think there's a powerful piece around how that transitioned. And when I heard the story that hopefully you'll share it, it reminded me of me. It reminded me of a lot of people that I speak to, a lot of men. And I think it can be really that relatability of the direction. Um, and maybe it's circumstantial, often is for men. Um, I think the majority are in circumstances that just don't serve them.
mm,
And it's environment, it's then doing all the things, the family, the mortgage, you're then in a position that is just challenging to uproot and to shake up
mm,
the snow globe and take time for yourself.
mm. Yeah, so I started architecture in Australia and met my girlfriend there, and she won a contract to go model in New York. And she's like, "Hey, once you graduate, do you want to come to New York?" And I was like, oh, "Great idea." And when I was living in Australia studying architecture, I was top of the world. Everything was going right. Everything was like, I was feeling exceptional as I was with my purpose, with my direction, with my lifestyle, with everything. And we moved to New York. Financial crisis is in full swing. 75% of architects have lost their jobs. I know nobody. I have no networks, no connections. End up working at a dive bar in the East Village. She's making all the money, but it's not that much, and we struggle for 2 years. And um, at that point, I just started taking drugs with a mate. Um, and then we moved to Berlin, and I start working as an architect properly, and I'm just like, this sucks. This is not what I thought it was going to be. And I was doing 80-hour weeks, um, and making shit money, and just not doing projects which were stimulating. And ultimately the marriage broke down, and I I was at a loss of like what to do, because I didn't want to do architecture anymore. And I had this great life from the outside, but internally I was deeply unhappy. So I decided to go traveling for 5 weeks, and 5 weeks ultimately became about 3.5 years. And it was a journey of how do I heal? I'm really fucked up. I got a lot of trauma that I've never looked at. I've been drinking for 20 odd years quite consistently, taking drugs pretty consistently for the past 3 or 4. So I started this journey of healing, which took 2.5 years maybe. And then it was like, okay, well, now what? And on that journey, I discovered Menswork, and people everywhere were like, hey, can you show me what you've done there? Can you teach me what you learned there? And it just became this thing. And I moved back to Berlin, back to architecture, because I needed the money. And again, just like, fuck, what am I doing? All I want to do is Menswork. And then COVID happened and I lost my job. It was like, huh, perfect. So I went full time into it, and had I was fortunate enough that we didn't have kids. I didn't have major responsibilities at the time. I could take the time off to travel. There was no golden cage. Um, and I just spent time doing the thing that really excited me. So whatever that was, it was either the thing that excited me or the thing that scared me. They were the two that I would go towards, and then they would lead to the next thing. And that was this. I remember a mate saying, "What are you? Yeah, but what are you going to do in 5 weeks? In 5 years' time?" But fuck it, I don't know what I'm doing in 5 weeks. Like I'm literally, I know next week I'm going to be here. I'm doing this thing. After that, no idea. And then I'd go and I'd do the thing, and then someone like, "Oh, I'm going to Peru." I was like, "Perfect, I'll come to Peru with you." So there was this. I had an intention, but there was no roadmap, and that freedom and that ability to just follow the thing that either scared me or excited me led me to doing what I do now. Um, and one of the things I do a lot of work with men on is purpose, and it's such a struggle for so many men, like this lack of meaning. And often they're either caught in a job, as you said, caught in a job they can't get out of because of responsibility, mortgage, kids, whatever. Even though they know that that's not it, or they know what they want to do, but they can't pull away, or they have no idea what they want to do, and they've got all this time in the world and whatever, but they don't know where to start. And for me and for many guys I've worked with, it's just do the next thing. Just take that next step. It's not about reaching the peak of a mountain you don't know the direction towards or you can't see. You take the next step in the direction that excites you, and that just creates this really beautiful existence, which will turn into something that gives you meaning.
Mm-hmm. Is that your approach now? Do you
Yeah.
plan? Can you see the mountain now, or do you just still?
Now it's a bit different because I have a son, and there is, I've spent the past 5 or 6 years really figuring out how things work. Um, I I did a lot of my own men's work for a while. I still do, but built up my own little thing, and then it became pretty successful. And then I met through more of men's work. I met a few other guys, and we were all kind of on the same path, same trajectory. So we've started this thing that we do together. Plus, I have my own thing. Plus, I know the thing that I'm going to train in next. Like I have vision for sure.
Mm.
Um, some of it is not specifically designed. These are the next 47 steps that I'm going to take to get there. But um, there's so many things on my plate, and yeah, I know the next step that I need to take when it's necessary.
Mm-hmm. So other than what you've mentioned about purpose, what do you really feel? is necessary to create more purpose? And do you think it's created, or do you feel it is also in accordance to some trajectory of our life and we can align ourselves to it?
It might not be 100% true, but it's the majority of the time, your purpose is in the pain. So whatever the thing is that really hurt you the most, if you sit in this victim, this thing happened to me, then you're probably going to struggle for a while. Once you figure out, oh, this thing happened for me, then everything shifts. And from that, in my case, sexual dysfunction was a huge thing. So premature ejaculation, erectile dysfunction, porn addiction, sexless relationship, all these things were a massive issue. And then, so I went into Tantra and realized that that was just meditation. So I went to neo-tantra, figured out full-bodied orgasms and make love for hours. And I was like, holy shit, this is a whole new world.
So you said
And then
Tantra was just meditation.
yeah, there's this misconception in the West that Tantra is sex, and it's not. I can't remember the exact numbers. It's something like this, making it up. There's 156 texts on Tantra, and like 5 pages mention sex. Like it's really not it at all.
Mm-hmm.
But neo-tantra, which is more of a Western bastardization, is very much about sex. And once I figured that out, I had a bunch of people say, hey, can you teach me this? I'm like, yeah, sure, I guess. And then that became my entryway. And then from that, I was with a partner and I could have full bodied orgasms. Like, this is great. But then I couldn't hold her in her pain. Like if we had an argument, my nervous system would collapse. I was like, fuck, okay, so this is the next thing I need to work on. I don't understand intimacy or polarity. So then I'm going to go to that. So then that started to expand. And then people would come to me for that. And it's just, my journey started with figuring out my own pain, healing my own pain. And then suddenly that became a pretty solid career. Not by intention, but just by how it works.
Yeah. So just saying on that subject matter, because it's very powerful. Do you teach people or advise? I'm not sure if you do give people advice, but is there a trajectory of going into these things that you think is preferable? So the way in for you was initially neo-tantra, it was sex and having, experiences of, I imagine, depth in that space and connection, but missing the piece around actually being with outside of that. So do you think now that the sex can be a way in? Does it matter too much, or do you think one needs to come before the other?
Great question. It was the path I took and a path many guys take, and I believe it is not the right path. I believe it's a shortcut looking for something greater. So your capacity to have full-bodied orgasms and make love for hours and God sex and all of these things. Yes, you need some tools and some awareness of certain things, but it's a side effect of depth. And the faster route is through Menswork, actually, through masculine practice, through meditation, through presence. So a lot of guys, their relationships are messed up and they're like, oh, well, I'll learn Tantra. And you go to these festivals and they are fucking riddled with these spiritual fuckboys. And I was one. Like I know the shadow in and out. And these guys are just energetically leaky and kind of repulsive when you know what to look for. And they just perpetuate trauma in women, and they don't heal themselves. They have this grandiose idea that they're out there, they're soft and sensitive and vulnerable and all of these things, and they're totally in their feminine the whole time. And it's this is why for me now, when I do teach about this stuff, it's like, okay, but let's do the real work first, because the other stuff will just come much easier once you have the foundation laid.
Mm. And if you're a woman, what's the thing to look out for? What are the tendencies of these men in these spaces, do you feel?
Women have a very capable radar of being able to track energetically. The problem is so many women are seeking the one, the man that's going to fucking, the king to their queendom. And a lot of these guys know exactly the thing to say. They know exactly what she needs to hear to make her melt. So they fall for it. And, or they are convinced to do things they don't want to do, like open relating or polyamory, because they get gaslit into believing that there's something wrong with them. So if you have a fairly solid bullshit radar, it's pretty easy to spot these guys. And energetically as well, most of them are not grounded. They're popping off all over the place, and they just feel really unsteady and unsafe.
Yeah, I asked that because I think one of the biggest things that moved the needle for me and helped me at the time didn't feel that way, of course. But women that didn't settle for my bullshit,
Yeah.
that really had like a higher standard for me, and it helped me. What thing do you think helped you realize that that was you and that was all playing out?
Men.
Mm.
I was in a training. I wasn't teaching at this point. But the moment I started to teach, I had it reflected back to me in a I was very much in integrity, but there was a moment where it was like, oh fuck, that could be taken the wrong way. But I was in the training before I was teaching, and I had this guy that I looked up to came up to me and he's like, "Do you need to zip up?" I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, "You're fucking leaking everywhere." I'm like, what do you mean? And then another mate came up to me and he said the same thing. I was like, oh boy. And then once I knew what he meant, I was somewhere else at a different event, and I saw a guy doing exactly that, and it repulsed me because I knew that's exactly what I did. And I was just fucking blind to it. And once I had that self-awareness, I was like, okay, I can see this everywhere now. And you see how they interact with women, and because they know what to say, women love them because they are sensitive and vulnerable. Women are they appear very safe, but they're just as manipulative and dangerous as the other shadow spectrum of the masculine.
What would you do if you saw that playing out now?
Fuck man, I see it a lot. The festivals that I work at and these things I go to all the time. There's a training that I do with my teacher where because I've been around for long enough, if there are other students that I see it, I acknowledge it to them. to the men, and just have a quiet conversation. Sometimes it's not my place. Like I don't for 1 second think I'm fucking better than anybody else. Sometimes I'll have a conversation with women if they come to me. But fuck, man, I'm not out there to preach or to lay my beliefs onto anybody. It's very much if somebody comes to me and asks, we can have a conversation, or if it's in a training or something that I'm facilitating or I have some kind of say in it, I would.
Yeah. If they're seeking that challenge out, and it's a dynamic between me and another man, that's actually there's a level of connection that we are looking out for each other as much as, you know, I'd want that.
For sure. No, I've had women ask me to go and say something to men, and like it's just not my job. It's like if the guy comes to me and says, hey, we talk about something, I'm very happy to reflect back to him what I see, but I'm definitely not going to just go up and offer my fucking opinion.
And then what was the next step really when you were realizing this stuff? Did you seek counsel with men? Did you do, when you say men's work? Also, I'd love you to define, you've touched on a few other things, but like men's work for you, like what does that encapsulate? Because it's a label I've battled with. I embrace it now and use it, but it definitely, and I have to look back upon my journey to be like, what words really didn't land, because that's likely true for someone right now. And yeah, like what was the next step really in that process for you?
There was figuring out why, and often it comes down to validation, this seeking of validation, and then okay, so why do I need that? And I think for me, the thread came back down to needing affirmation and love from my father when I was a child. So, I've done quite a bit of therapy on this stuff, and it's not something to feel shame or guilt or anything. It's just like, okay, there's a thread that I can pull on. What happens if I keep pulling? Men's work for me is it's a space where men can come and be real, whatever that looks like, without judgment, without fear. But the thing that I really love about it the most is to be called forward. It's like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. I expect more from you. I had a conversation with a very, very dear brother who I do this work with, around my relationship. And I was fucking in it. I couldn't find the light. And he's fucking like this solid, grounded dude, just smiled at me with gentle eyes and just fucking served me. And it was like, oof, okay, that lands. Yeah. And that having those men in your life that can really sharpen you. This is the other, one of the masculine spectrum. If you have healthy in the middle and you have the passive nice guy on one side and the dominant inverted commas toxic masculine on the other, the passive guy spends most of his time around women. All of his friends are women because, fill in the reasons. It's more fun. They're more vulnerable. He's afraid of men and masculinity. He's extricated himself from his own masculine, like all of these things. Problem with only just having women friends is you don't have men to call you out. So it's rare that you're going to get a woman that turns around and says, "Hey, you've been leaky with all these women," or "Hey, the problem with your relationship is in these moments you're defending rather than actually just listening and validating." Like, you're not going to get it's going to be rare that you get sharp feedback from women. Whereas men that know you and can see you and can see through your bullshit, there's a nourishment and there's a gift in that. And for me, that's a big part of men's work. And the other part is masculine practice. So much of men's work today is just feminine practice. It's like screaming and beating your chest and dancing around and crying and all these things, which is great and amazing and necessary. But it's all just feminine practice. Like, there needs to be this widening, this awareness of the awareness. You know, I'm in this moment, I'm having this experience. Rather than identifying with that experience, actually sitting back, becoming aware of all of it, and then witnessing yourself through that. And then, you know, this is the key piece. And back to the very first question of what is masculinity, it is this key piece of the transmission of consciousness, which you cannot get when you're identified with the screaming or the emotional release or whatever.
I could see that being controversial to people hearing that. The beating your chest, the screaming, the anger, the release, the expression. Obviously, when we talk about expression, that can be energy, and that's feminine, right?
Anything that's moving is feminine.
Mm.
Everything that's moving is feminine. And so there's nothing wrong with, you know, it's fucking necessary to scream, release. Absolutely necessary. But if that's all you're doing, you're going to come home to your partner after a weekend of inverted commas men's work, when all you've done is identify with your emotion and with your energy and with your expression. You are no more masculine to her than before you left. You're actually probably more feminine energetically. And I've spoken to a number of women that are like, I'm not going to date a dude who does men's work because he's fucking too much in his feminine. Because he knows the words, he knows the lingo, he knows how to sit down and express, and then she ends up holding him in that all the time. So this is exactly the problem. And then you get the man that, oh, you can't, you know, why hate on men for just doing the work? It's like, I love that they're doing the work, but if they're doing the work walking the wrong direction, then it's not actually beneficial for their relationship.
Mm.
So yes, great, do the work, but do it properly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's almost irrelevant.
So powerful, this point. I think it's spot on. One of the things I noticed early on when I was putting on these events was that it's actually pretty easy to come away and feel held, feel safe in these environments, and be given permission to just speak your truth. It's actually quite easy. It's quite easy to do that. Happens a lot, and it rarely doesn't happen. But then what happens after, and it's of course the integration piece, but what happens after with that energy? How does that translate, and how does that then start to improve your relationships with your parents, with your kids, like all of it? It's how you live in the world day to day. And this is a great point. I never really saw it like this, but it is that ability to take that, integrate it, but yeah, like learn a lot from it, but then don't go putting it on anyone. But then, like, how do we develop that ability to hold all of that and know when to and when not to be with it? I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. How do you then start to, and maybe on a retreat that maybe you think is missing some pieces that are going to be better ways to hold all of this expression and more developing that consciousness that you spoke about?
I mean, it comes down to practice, and it comes down to having the experience over and over again, and failing and recommitting and failing and recommitting. And within relationship, it's what serves love is something that I always come back to. And if you crying in your partner's arms is necessary because your fucking dog died or something, sure. But if you're crying in your partner's arms because you've had a rough day at work, and then the next day because your football team lost, and then the next, it's like anything that is consistently keeping her in the masculine, if that's the dynamic of your relationship, is going to wear her down. And once you flip the polarity, and because of the society we live in, a lot of the time the polarity is already flipped based on the dynamic of when you meet. If you're not consistently practicing holding the masculine pole, there's going to be no intimacy, there's going to be massive resentment, and you're going to sit there and wonder why your relationship sucks. Especially in long-term relationships, it's one of the bigger problems for men is that there's no physical intimacy. So, well, if your partner is holding the masculine pole of the relationship most of the time, of course there's not going to be. So there's this awareness piece around, okay, what is going to serve the moment? You know, I had a moment with my son was 4 days old, and we're in hospital because he needs to go through this procedure, otherwise he could die. And it's like, Jesus, 4 days old. That was not what, we had planned this 40-day kind of container when maybe we would meet our parents, but there'd be nobody else. And suddenly we're in hospital and he's getting needles stuck in his body and he's on antibiotics and all these things. And I just wanted to fucking collapse. Like, I just wanted to curl up and have somebody else take care of it. And that absolutely would not have served anybody. So I became wider than my own pain, my own emotion, and my own story, and wider than my partners and wider than him, and held them through that. And then went home and fucking broke down when I was by myself.
And that's healthy for you.
Which bit?
The making sure you take that space for yourself intentionally.
I've still got more to release.
Yeah.
Because
I think there is a rhetoric around like showing emotion and being in that. Of course, it's a whole grey piece around, yes, being with emotion, not suppressing, not avoiding, not moving away from or distracting or reaching for the thing to just get you away from what's actually happening here and now. But then knowing, I need to dedicate some time tonight or when to go there.
This is exactly the masculine piece, is having awareness of the emotion. It's like, oh, fuck, okay, there's this thing inside of me. Great, I need to deal with that. The feminine is, oh my God, there's this thing inside of me and I'm going to identify with it to the point where it's going to consume me. And I'm going to cry, or I'm going to break down, or I'm going to... And, that it is... This piece around my son in hospital is still super tender, and I didn't realize, because I processed a lot, and then it was just randomly 2 weeks ago, somebody asked me, how was the experience of his birth, and I was just like, oh. And even speaking to you in the beginning of the call, it's like, fuck, this is still present, like it still needs to be released, and that's something that I need to make time for. And again, the burden of fucking life and fatherhood and whatever is right now, it's about seventh on the list of priorities. But that needs to change. And we're both aware of it. We both have an understanding of like, okay, we have these things that need to be released, and just there's compassion for that. On top of not sleeping, on top of all of these other things. My job is to actually make time for us as a couple, as individuals, to create that structure where we can do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my superpower as a man has been the ability to compartmentalize. And I've noticed it. I resonate with this so much. I've noticed it at times. I'm like, fuck, like there is so much here, but I can really be with it and actually just not address it right now and create some time for it. But yeah, there's been shame there. There's been like maybe like worry and questioning over, is this healthy? Is this me avoiding again? But I've also acknowledged, oh no, that this is a real superpower. Like I'm very glad I'm not just leaking everywhere right now. I'm just an absolute mess because I need to fucking pack my bags and leave. That needs to happen.
Yeah, I've definitely got I have a very strong feminine emotional body, which it takes a lot of work to really pull myself back. I was watching my teacher. His daughter died when she was 23, and he was giving a meditation at her funeral. There's 1,500 people at the funeral, and he's up there, and he just mentions that towards the end of the meditation, and now it's time for us to all let her go and be free. And he is calm, grounded, composed. And I'm just watching this thing on my phone, just fucking weeping. I'm like, dude, how do you do that? And he's like, I take myself wider than the emotion. And he's like, yeah. And to be fair, after that, I walked downstairs with a group of men from my men's circle and fucking broke down. But in that moment, that's practice to become wider than the emotion.
Thank you, man. What are some of the things you're excited about birthing? I know, other than the child, I know you're on Monday. You've got your container openings. All right,
Yeah, I got this little 5-week container for women, which is actually super exciting. I'm sure it'll be out by the time this goes to air, but I'll likely do it again at some point. I was just having a conversation with a mate yesterday about, because a lot of the retreats we do are in America, and I was having a conversation yesterday with a mate who's in Sweden about doing a little retreat for men in the summer next year. Just taking a bunch of canoes, going into nature for 3 or 4 days, fishing, living off the land, men's work. That really fucking lit me up. That's been something I've wanted to do for many years, just because I'm a dude that loves that shit. But to do it with a bunch of men, nothing more nourishing for men than being in nature with other men. So, but that won't be until June, and then, man, life is just full power at the moment. So we have a men's program coming out. We release it next week, actually. That starts in January. It's a 4-month program. There's a retreat in February and one in May. It kind of bookends the program. It's a embodied masculine leadership training. Super powerful. And we just started a facilitator training. So the first retreat is next week. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on.
Exciting, man. I just love watching you light up just when you mention the canoeing. It's such a picture, isn't it? Just
To the north of Sweden in a canoe fishing with a bunch of dudes, campfire at night time. Yes, please.
Yeah, I love it. Amazing. And where did you say the embodiment masculinity is?
So the 4-month program is online, and then the 2 retreats are in Austin.
Mm-hmm. Is that where you're based?
I'm in Amsterdam.
Ah, you are. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Beautiful. Going into winter. Amsterdam for me is one of the most livable cities. Every time I go there, I just feel like I just feel at home there. It's so interesting.
It's really beautiful. It rains a bit, which is
yeah.
I'm not used to, but it's such a beautiful city.
Yeah. Just the energy. I think it just seems to be quite seamless, and it's a grey at times, even in what people wear, but I don't know, there's just something, it's just, do you know what it is? I remember thinking about this. It's that because of their relationship with maybe being open to drugs, it's more just open. It's like less judgmental, and like big cities sometimes are. It just has that kind of openness and freedom within it. Yeah.
And they're incredibly kind and welcoming. And I lived in Berlin for a long time, and fucking polar opposite. So it's something that I really, it can be an old dude working in a market. It's like, hey, man, super friendly. And I missed that after being in Germany for so long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful, man. Thank you for your time, brother. I really appreciate it, especially in context of what's going on in your life and the widening that's needed. Yeah, man. Anything else you want to speak to, or where people can find you? Where's best to follow your work?
Yeah, I mean, Instagram or website, nicwarner.com, and then Nic Warner on Instagram is NIC Warner, like Warner Brothers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, man. And yeah, just full in reverence for how you're showing up. You could be doing so many different things, and you're choosing this, and it's epic. We didn't talk about responsibility, but I know that's a big piece of yours as well. Like I put that to my men's group this week. Like, what would it look like to take 100% responsibility? And then I drew upon all the times that's changed my life. Just looking at it from that lens. The first book I ever read was called Radical Honesty, and I guess it's the same thing. It's like, how responsible can I be with my word? Yeah.
I mean, that's one thread that's so many guys have resistance to it. Well, no, because it's her fault. So yeah, sure. But what if you took 100% responsibility? And as soon as the penny drops, fucking game changer. So yeah, I mean, imagine if everybody took 100% responsibility.
I was feeling into that yesterday. I was like, what would this look like actually? Take a step back if everyone had that approach.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
But we can't change other people. We can only change ourselves. So start there.
I can be responsible for me not taking your responsibility. Yeah. Cool, man. Thank you, bro.
Thanks, man.